pretty difficult passages where I'm starting each one with, there's some things that are problematic. So I decided to get off of the Gospel of Luke for a little bit. And I'm doing Job. And she said, "You're doing Job? That doesn't sound unproblematic." And I was like, well, you may be right. Let's listen to what Job has to say. Or the book of Job has to say. It's a long one, so stick with me. There once was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. Now there were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants. So that this man was the greatest of all the people of the east. His sons used to go and hold feasts in one another's houses in turn, and they would send and invite their sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." So this is what Job always did. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From walking to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." And Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, all that he has is in your power. Only do not stretch out your hand against him." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell on them and carried them off, and killed all the servants with the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was speaking, another came and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. I'm the only one left to tell the story." While he was still speaking, another came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 columns, made a raid on the camels, and carried them off and killed all the servants with the edge of the sword. I am the only one left to tell you." And while he was speaking, another came and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine at the eldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came across the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on all the young people. They are all dead. I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And from Luke 13, at that very time there was some present who told him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. He asked them, "Do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, they were worse sinners than the other Galileans? No, I tell you, but unless you change your mind and your attitude, you also will perish. Or those 18 who were killed when the Tower of Siloam fell on them, do you think they were worse offenders than all the others living in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, but unless you change your mind and your outlook, you will all perish just as they did." And he told a parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the gardener, "See here, for 3 years I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and still I find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" And he replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year until I dig round it, put manure on it, And if it bears fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
This is a painting, and the title of it is called Job is Mocked by His Wife. Job seeks to address probably the oldest question in humanity. And it's not the one that you normally hear. Most preachers don't want to preach on Job. You find it in the lectionary, you find something else to preach on. Or the message of Job is the faithfulness of Job, or Job was so righteous that God gave him all this stuff back. And we're going to see that that really isn't the case. The question really that is posed, and we don't really get an answer, is why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to good people? Job comes from a section of the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew text called the Writings, meaning that it's meant to be read as sacred story or myth. And when we try to prove the existence of Job, Job may have lived, I don't know, all of this may have happened, but when we try to prove the historical veracity of this, we miss the deeper meanings that are in the book of Job. Job, one of my seminary professors told me, she said, I'm almost certain Job was written as a play, was written as a story, and rather than sit here and read 40 chapters of Job to you, I've decided to turn it into a little bit of a story myself. There's humor in the book of Job, and there's humor in my story, so please don't be offended. But what we'll be doing is trying to answer a few questions. What does Job, the story of Job, tell us about why did bad things happen to good people? How does God react when people get really angry in the midst of grief? And is God someone who can be placated or manipulated? This is Job's wife mocking him. But of course, the story starts quite a bit before that. Job was the quintessential man who did everything right. And for a while, everything was just so great. It seemed like the more upright and faithful and righteous that he was, the more God rewarded him. First off, of course, everybody wants a son to pass on the family farm and the family name. Job was such a faithful servant and a believer in God that one son, though, wasn't enough. God had blessed him with 7 sons and 3 daughters and a wife who, at least in good times, was loving and faithful. But it didn't stop there. Our story tells us God had been so good to Job on the animal front that it would make Noah blush with envy. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys. Included in on the deal were enough servants to water and feed the whole kit and caboodle. He was the greatest man of all the people of the East. While Job seems to have been kind of a quiet guy who liked to pray, his kids apparently really knew how to party. Kids will be kids, Job said. What can you do? Birthday parties were their favorite. And all the boys would crash at the birthday boy's pad and invite their sisters over too. And the parties would last for days. They'd have a real feast. Oh, they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast on aged oose wine, oose pudding, and rare oose roast beast. But Job would stay home. Oose roast beast is a dish I can't stand in the least, he would say. So instead he would wake up early when the smoke was clearing, glasses clanking from servants loading the dishwasher and roaming around passing out Tylenol and orange juice. And he would sacrifice an offering on an altar for each one of the little party animals, just in case, during the wild party, even a stray thought entered their mind. Maybe they had sinned by questioning God or criticizing the way God did business. And everybody knows that is a real no-no. So one day, it seems, what we read in the text is the sons of God all got together for a meeting with the boss. And one of the sons was Satan. And actually, at this time in history, Satan isn't such a bad guy. First off, he's one of God's sons, so he's on the inside. He's one of the in crowd. It wasn't for another couple hundred years that Satan turns into a figure like a snake or a fallen angel who tries to overthrow God. Actually, he's called Ha-Satan, or the accuser. He's the county prosecutor who accuses people of doing bad stuff. But he can't really do anything about it. It's just a job, you know. Anyway, so after the hors d'oeuvres and the cocktails get going up in heaven, God says, "Oh, hey, Satan, what you been up to?" Satan says, "Pretty much just chilling. You know, I like to call it going to and fro on the earth and walking back and forth and up and down on it." "Right," Yahweh said, as he swallowed a bite of sushi with jasmine rice and a little too much wasabi, which made his eyes water a bit. He snapped his fingers again a few times and said, "Hey, while you were down there, did you happen to catch my servant Job?" Yahweh caught the slight eye roll by Satan, and he said, "What? No, really, what? Let me tell you, there's nobody down there like him. He's a seriously solid, righteous guy, who, by the way, doesn't get involved in all that partying, and also happens to hold you-know-who in pretty high esteem." "Oh boy," said the Satan. "Well, I'm sure, sir. Okay, but what do you expect? I mean, you two are kind of a harlequin romance, aren't you? I mean, he prays or does something righteous, so you reward him, which makes him more grateful, so he can thank you even more, which, by the way, makes him bless you even more. The guy's got 10 kids and more animals than he knows what to do with. Look, sir, I really wasn't going to say anything, and I'm not trying to get the guy in trouble. But since you brought it up, I might as well tell you, if you were to say let things go south on it just a little bit, well, I'm pretty sure he would call you a good-for-nothing so-and-so and tell you to buzz right off." God thought about it a minute and said, "That's a bold statement. Are we talking about a wager here?" But inside he was wondering, is the Satan right? So he said, "Okay, if you're right, go ahead. Take all his stuff away if that's what you think. But don't hurt it. I mean, physically, right?" So the Satan went away. Can I get one more, Kate? Poor Job had no idea what was coming his way. Then came the day, and oh, what a day it was. All the kids were partying as usual at the oldest brother's house when the servant staggered into Job's door. "Sir, guess what? The Sabaeans came and took away all the cattle and killed all the servants. I'm the only one left." Then another one ran in. "Sir, a lightning bolt killed all the servants and the sheep. I'm the only one left." Then another one. "The Chaldeans made off with all your camels and killed the servants. I'm the only one left to tell you." Now, all of this would have been enough to put anyone over the edge. But then the worst news of all. "Sir, I hate to tell you, but all your sons and daughters were having a party when a freak wind blew up out of nowhere, and the whole house collapsed in on them." So Job got up, and he tore his robes, and he said, "Curse you, God." No, actually, he said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the Lord." Oh, the Satan was furious, and Yahweh rather smug at the next big get-together. "So, Satan, where have you been?" said Yahweh, as he and everyone else erupted in laughter. "How's my servant Job doing down there?" The Satan said, "Okay, you win round one. But if I were able to give him just a little physical pain, I'd win for sure." "Okay," Yahweh said, "you're on. Just don't kill him." So Satan afflicted Job with terrible boils from head to toe. Job's wife finally had enough, and she said, "What are you, nuts? Curse God and die. It's all you can do." But Job told her to be quiet, and he refused to curse God. He just sat there in the ashes. Just then, 3 of Job's buddies showed up. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And one of them said, "Oh man, this is bad. Really bad." They were so amazed. They couldn't think of a thing to say, so they did the best thing of all. They just sat there. They didn't say a thing for an entire week. But finally, the lid on the kettle blew right off. Job frankly loses it completely with everybody. His wife, his friends, life, God, everyone. And he says, "Curse the day I was born. Why couldn't I die in childbirth? If only I had strangled on the umbilical cord or something. And you, God, you." And then he lets God have it for 37 chapters. He rails against God as he makes his case. His 3 loyal friends start to look a little nervous. They start to look at the sky, expecting maybe lightning to fall, and they edge nervously away from Job and try to reason with him. "Job, look, this really stinks. But you can't blame God. You know how the system works. 1, blaming God is really dangerous. And 2, the system works this way. You do good stuff and God blesses you. You do bad stuff and God punishes you. And from the look of things, I mean, wow, yours must have been a real doozy." Job says, "No, I can't think of a thing." They pleaded with him, "Think, man, there must be something." "No, nothing." Job lashes out one more time. Broke, childless, covered in boils, he rages at God. "I have done everything you asked me to do. Why is this happening to me? Why? Answer me." And in this case at least, God gives Job exactly what he wants and more. He's like a roaring lion rising up against an ant. Yahweh, who might have been a little miffed at losing the bet too, we don't know, says, "Oh really? Excuse me, but just who in the heck do you think you are? Stand up so I can question you, you little pipsqueak. Where were you when I created the earth and the sea and the creatures on the land and the monsters in the sea? When I scattered the stars across the galaxies with such artistic flair all the angels clapped for joy." And for 4 chapters he grills Job, but not once does he answer Job's question. When God wraps up giving it to Job with both barrels, Job thinks the better of the whole situation. And he says, I'm really sorry. I guess I forgot who I am. I'm just dust, and to dust I'll return. That was actually kind of stupid of me to ask those questions and to act on them. Can I get one more? God does give us a little insight as our story comes to an end. He chastises Job's friends for their way of thinking, that good behavior gets you automatically rewarded, and bad behavior gets you punished. "I'm not a vending machine God," God says, "that you can control by stuffing money into a slot and pushing the right button." And then he also actually praises Job for losing his cool. And however angry or disrespectful Job got, God is always big enough to absorb our anguish, our grief, and our anger. And no matter how bad things get, God is always there with us in the midst of it all. In this case, at least, everything Job had before gets given back to him, but this time in spades, even more than he had before. More kids, more grandkids this time, and camels and donkeys and oxen to boot. We don't know why God did it. Only God knows. And you and I are God. Amen.